Aloha, everyone. Welcome to AIM, Aloha in Motion Global Leadership Conference. This is our second time around. I'm Shar Ravella with Leadership Kaua'i, and I have our esteemed core advisors with us for this morning. I'd like to go ahead and have them introduce themselves. Go right ahead.
Hey, aloha and good morning, everybody. I'm Captain Vinny Johnson. Again, we're on for the second day, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. It was for the further discussions that we had yesterday was an amazing first day. And for those of you who may not know who I am, I was the former commanding officer there at the Pacific Missile Range in Kauai, and I'm now on the board of directors for Leadership Kauai. So aloha.
Aloha, Bernard Carvalho, Council Member Carvalho right now. I just look forward to our team members joining in again and some healthy discussion. It was a great day yesterday. And mahalo for the leadership, Char. And I look forward to all the different sessions. There's a lot of great, good information flowing. And I think we can make things happen on Kauai as well as abroad. So look forward to the healthy discussion for today as we kind of share our mana'o with every one of you. So thank you so much for joining in. Aloha.
Thank you. Before we hear from Puna, I forgot a little bit of housekeeping, and that is that for those of you that would like to use closed captioning, please click that on the bottom of your Zoom tab bar on the bottom. Click that on, and we have closed captioning for you. Aloha in motion all the way through. So, Mike, welcome. Good morning.
Sorry, I'm just coming in.
Great. Can you go ahead and introduce yourselves? Perfect timing, actually. Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe I'll go first because I'm the late one. So it's a pleasure to meet everybody. My name is Mike Rubel. Captain Vinny Johnson and I, about 3 years ago, when he was the CEO of the Navy base on Kauai and getting ready to transition off island, he and I were talking about ways that we could give back, he could give back to the island. And we came up with this idea that a conference to kind of connect people around the world and kind of talk about the spirit of aloha and the spirit with which people on the island of Kauai conduct business and get connected to other people around the world to learn about things that might be applicable on island, but also to kind of talk about the best way to do business. I got to know a bunch of people on island, Shar and Bernard and Puna, and I was just so impressed with the values that are so imbued in the society and in the business culture that I loved it. And for me now, Kauai is all about that, and it's less about the beaches, even though Puna has a nice beach in the background there. But so it's a pleasure to meet you guys. It's been a pleasure to work with all these wonderful people on the island. And I really hope that we can find ways to get people connected around the world and export this feeling of aloha to other people around the world and add value to this wonderful island, even though I'm stuck in Seattle. Thanks, Shar. Who's next?
Puna.
Oh boy. Oh, Puna, you're on mute.
Really showing my kupuna action. I just want to say I'm proud to say that I was part of a group that helped to create Leadership Kauai, and the intention about creating relationships between island people and further, and to see it come to fruition, which is what has happened over the years. I think we're at year 22, I think. And don't count on believing me, okay? What I want to say is Aloha in Motion is exactly that. We're all part of this fabric for the world. And the answer is in the relationship that we share with each other, and especially knowledge. Kauai, our island name, Kauai, is exactly that. It is to come, cultivate, make happen Kaua'i, food, and that food is the knowledge. And so, coming together, seeing all of the presenters that were there with us yesterday, and then to know all of you that are coming on today, connecting the world in this ocean of time, I feel so blessed. And some of our leaders are no longer here. What I'm saying is, they've gone beyond the veil. But I'm sure they're all pinching themselves when they see what has grown from an idea and a thought. So thank you for being a part of all of this. Thank you, Shar. Thank you for all the staff, but especially thank you for all the advisors and all the people who do come to the table and bring with them these gifts. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Puna. And so in Kaua'i style, leadership Kaua'i style, Hawaiian style, I like us all to come together to set the intention for today, right? We ask our classes, we ask each other, what do you want for today? What do you want to receive from this conference? This is time and energy that you are spending to help us move forward in very important area of agriculture on our island. So what would you like to receive personally for today? So with that thought, we're going to go into a short video and hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
That's Pai. Akahai e na Hawaii lokai aku like olu olu o kamana o ha ko kulana aloha mai e na Hawaii ke aloha no kaumea nui e o mai e na Hawaii na puane na mamo na puale na mamo ala mai e ka lahui laula e kaulana o mai e ka lehu lehu ha'aheo e na Hawaii ano ai no me ke aloha
These different implements that are being shown is how we express the idea of aloha. The first implement was an ipu that represents you. The second was the pu'ili that represents family. What you see now is time that is held in our hands. It's the ili ilis and the rocks of our ancestors. And you hear the uli uli. So these are all different breaths. And this represents procreation, or the continuation of man, male and female, interacting with one another energetically.
Na puale na mamo
Mahalo for this opportunity in sharing aloha with you. From the first implement, akahai, to be kind to yourself. The second implement, lokahi, to be a family, to be reunited in one thought. What was also shown was the understanding of the kala'au, or the time, and that represents community. In the fourth implement, which were the pohaku explains to us time. We hold 4 pohaku. The first that acknowledges the present time. The second that acknowledges the time that we are, and the time that was. The third that expresses the future. And the last one is choice. This represents man. So we hold our time in our hands. And as we gather from area to area throughout the world, we bring everyone to this one thought of caring for what we have for all the tomorrows. In the last implement, the uliuli, the bottom of the uliuli is man, or mankind. Inside there is 64 stones, 64 that represent our ali'ipo'e, or our DNA. And on the other side is female. So it is an exchange of both energies that bring together the procreation of life. So when we think about akahai, to be kind to ourselves, lokahi, to be a family, olu olu, to be able to listen and express the world as we understand it, and then ha'a, to be humble, to know that we don't all have all the answers, that we need one another, and then the last ahonui, the patience to do all of this. These are the characteristics of we, the people of the planet, man who is kind. Mahalo, aloha.
Mahalo nui puna. So I ask our attendees, do you have your intention set for today? I'd like to challenge you all in leadership style. Where is your aloha? As you go through the conference and you hear the different expressions of helping one another, clue into where is your aloha? And better yet, where do you see aloha in motion happening in your world, in your family, and the world beyond your doors? Where is the aloha in motion happening for you? So with that, I'd like to hand the mic over to Mike Rubel to take us through our first exciting panel discussion.
Thanks, Charm. Puna, it is always a challenge to follow you in anything. So thank you so much for kicking this off in great style. Bernard, I'm glad to see that you're on the same beach I am, but I think I've somehow inverted mine, and mine's backwards. So anyways, the Hanalei Pier in my version is backwards. So listen, it's a pleasure for me today to introduce 2 friends. Rob Tiffany and I work together at Ericsson. I've known him for a while, and we've just always enjoyed talking about who we wanted to bring into this conference. I thought of Rob just because of his technological background and kind of the some of the things that he's been doing in the ag tech space over the last several years. Rob is currently the head of IoT strategy at Ericsson. As you can see from his fancy office, he has a very fancy title too. Yeah. So Rob, thank you for joining us. I'll let you do a more proper introduction. Fred Cal and I have gotten to know each other during my time on the island, and have become friends, and have really, Fred, I enjoy our talks about technology and what you're doing on the farm. And I'm just only sorry that we can't be there on your farm to host this conference live, but soon enough, hopefully. So Fred is the general manager of Kaua'i Coffee Company and is doing some amazing things on the island of Kauai. And so we wanted to start this day off with Rob and Fred having kind of a conversation about what's happening on the island, from Fred and from Rob to kind of say, well, here's what's happening in the world, and let's see if we can find some synergies and some crossover where we could all kind of find some value And so without further ado, Fred, Rob, I'll turn it over to you. Maybe you guys can introduce yourselves and what you're doing, and we'll take it from there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
And yes, I'm stuck in Seattle with Mike as well. So what a bummer.
I'll send you my background picture. You can have that.
Yeah, absolutely. Aloha, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. When I've spent so much time in the Internet of Things space, and for all kinds of commercial reasons, whether it's factories, industry. But over time, I realized that there's a lot more that this technology could give to people. And whether it's agriculture, if it's helping with sustainability, there's so many challenges in our world that aren't related to business and commerce. And as it turns out, having plants, having machines, having the environment talk to us can make it really helpful for us to make a better world and to do some great stuff. So I'm really excited to be here.
Thanks, Fred.
Hello, Mike. How's it, Rob?
Hey.
Always an interesting perspective when you get this many different people from different walks of life. Today we're talking about ag, we're talking about technology, but it touches so much of what we do. But luckily, I was fascinated by your background. I think I saw people going out to go surf behind you before we left. Here at Kaua'i Coffee, we're nearly 3,000 acres. We're probably one of the most mechanized coffee farms in the world. Yet we have our roots and our plantation heritage and our culture and our families that live here, our community. As hard as I push on the technology side, which is the Mr. Gadget part of me, I have to realize that we're part of a community, and the things that we learn through the help of either larger corporations or a broader market reach can have an impact on other things that we do within the community. So I look forward to trying to unpack that a little bit with you.
Great, thanks, Fred. So maybe a good way to start, Fred, maybe you can kind of give everybody a little bit of perspective on what you're doing on island, and then Rob, I'd like your perspective on what you've been doing, especially in the state of Washington with Thunderstruck with Ericsson, and maybe your platform as well.
I'm going to go first, Mike?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of group it into three broad categories. Some of the things that we're doing here on the farm. The first is mechanization. So we're in a very tight labor market. We have a very significant brain drain that happens from the state of Hawaii, and we lose sometimes some of our best and brightest. So mechanization is one way that we overcome the labor component of what we're doing. And again, we're not trying to put people out of jobs. We're trying to create more technical jobs, higher paying jobs, perhaps more satisfying jobs. The second area is sensors. So as we talk about IoT, or as I like to call it, IOF, Internet of Farm, there's a lot going on in terms of sensors, and we're beginning to explore it, but I think there's just a tremendous area we can go further. And the third area is data. So data is the new oil for business, and understanding what it is we're getting from our sensors, or what information we're gathering even from our team, and how we integrate that, and then potentially how we integrate that with other businesses or other cooperators on the island is an important part. So those are the big three that I'm going to talk about: mechanization, sensors, and data. Mechanization, Kaua'i Coffee was built around mechanical harvesting, which was one of the big changes that happened in the coffee industry in the late 80s. My dad was actually the first guy to bring a mechanical harvester to Kona back in 1989. And I think the one that he brought from the mainland, a modified blueberry picker, ended up over here on Kauai before it finally rusted out. But it's not just harvesting, it's anything that we can do more efficiently from a tractor, have a smaller footprint, a smaller labor impact, the better off we can be. We've also got an irrigation system, which I'll count as mechanization, which allows us to deliver fertilizer to every tree. I've got almost 2,500 miles of drip irrigation throughout my farm, which, if we stretched it out, would take me almost to San Francisco, but not quite. That allows us to grow crops where we wouldn't be able to grow them without natural rain. So the Kona area of the Big Island, Sumatra, and other coffee growing regions are that way because that's where the rains fall and that's where coffee is historically grown. But the irrigation systems, especially the irrigation systems we have, the legacy irrigation systems we have here on Kauai, are an incredibly valuable resource. We don't want to be in a position where we are wasting water or hoarding water, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we're able to share water intelligently and use the water as best we can. And that gets into other mechanization that we're looking at, I think on the horizon, and things that we're exploring, but we haven't yet put on the ground here, is robotics. There are many things that as we look at what's going on with self-driving cars and other devices, which are really rolling sensor platforms, the things that we're able to do with them as a result. So moving into sensors, we have your basic farming tools, maybe your anemometers or rain gauges or other types of sensors. Cameras is another that we're using. We're using drone technology. Initially, we're using it for mapping and other types of things, and now we're using it mainly to tell our story. The compelling nature of a photograph of a farm from the air or a video of the farm from the air tells our story better than I can do by showing a picture and wave my hands. So other sensors that we're using, as most of you know, we have now coffee berry borer on the island of Kauai. It took 10 years to get here from the Big Island, but it's here. It's on our farm. And we're actually equipping our, hopefully that's an iPhone if you can't see it. My team now has our mobile sensors. They all have, on our scout team, they have sensors that they can go out, and anytime they see an infestation of beetles and other types of things, they can basically drop a pin on the map, take a picture of what they're seeing, and it gets aggregated into a dashboard for the team to work with. I know we're fighting tooth and nail to keep little fire ant away from the rest of the island. That's another thing that a geographic-based sensor platform like an iPhone allows us to map, take pictures of, get real-time indications. Third piece is data. We've got tremendous amount of data. I was able to look at this morning as we were finishing harvesting some of our fields, the exact yield per acre that each field was giving me, that in the past I would have seen at the end of the year, and I might not have used the information because I'm busy doing something else. So real-time data that we can make decisions off of is extremely important. So the data is really where we integrate all the information coming from the sensors. We begin to make decisions, the decision tools. Also, market data and other coordination that needs to be going on, what's going on in the marketplace. We're now looking at a gradual shift for Kauai coffee. Kauai coffee was founded under a commodity coffee model. How much coffee can we grow? How cheap can we grow it? And now we're shifting toward a higher quality coffee. So we really need to be looking at specific indicators of soil health and cup quality and the relations between those, and how do we continue to make it better. We're seeing a big shift. We've now got our sustainability certifications, which is more about how we treat our team and how we treat our land. But to pursue that kind of community involvement coupled with technology is really the only way that we're able to make that happen. Does that answer your question, Mike?
That's perfect. Thanks, Fred. That kicks it off.
Wow.
Because where I want to go is then, Rob, I want you to kind of maybe explain a little bit about what you're doing, but then let's try and find the intersection, because Fred, you've done a great job at taking some very technical kind of things and then translating it down to what actually can work on the ground. And Rob, I think you've done a lot of that.
Yeah.
Well, especially lately.
You know what? Actually, you don't need me, as it turns out. It sounds like Fred's got it all figured out already. If I think of a spectrum, who's on what side of the spectrum, Fred's knocking it out of the park. If I step back a little bit and if I just take a global look, the challenges that folks are facing, climate gets all the headlines, but there's this other global challenge, and it's around farming and food. You may have seen it from the UN and stuff like that. By 2050, we are going to have upwards of 10 billion people on the planet, and we are going to have to almost double food production just to keep up, just to keep food on the table and keep people alive. that's like the tallest order. In fact, I was listening in on a program with a bunch of farmers. I think they were from the Midwest, and they said farmers are going to have to create more food than every farmer since the beginning of farming between now and 2050. And so what a quantum leap that is. And so that's hard enough as it is. They need, it's all the help, it's all hands on deck, right? But then it turns out there's these other headwinds, you know, and while you've got a great place there in Kaua'i, you know, there's other parts of the world there's this whole notion of desertification happening. That's a weird word. And basically what it's meaning is that rich soil, like Fred was talking about, and the nutrients is turning to just dirt, to lifeless dirt. I saw a statistic that said I think it was the last 40 years, we've lost almost 30% of arable land on the planet, which is terrifying. Some of that is from drought. Some of it is from really bad farming practices, actually, that people didn't know any better. You know, it worked for a while, but, you know, maybe it doesn't last. You know, we've seen fires in the Western United States. Drought has been rampant everywhere. Gosh, yes. So no shortage of headwinds, you know, and it's really bad if you're in California. You know, the Colorado River is running out of gas. And aquifers are being depleted. I don't think people realize that these oceans that are living beneath them are almost about to become empty caves. I think there's a town in the Central Valley in California that sunk 11 feet because of that. I don't think, and so all this stuff impacts all of us as human beings. I mean, the future of farming is the future of humanity, just all up. And but so many people live in cities and they just live out their lives, and they go to the grocery store and they go to restaurants and they don't see the connection. You know what I mean? But I think they're starting to see it now a little bit. I think people are going to grocery stores and noticing things aren't on the shelves lately. You know how some strange things all of a sudden get in the vernacular? Like you're hearing people say the word supply chain, and they've never uttered those words in their life. I hear terms like fire season as becoming a normal term. I don't like incorporating horrible things like that and making it like a standard. Oh, I wonder what fire season's going to be like this year, right?
Like Halloween, right?
Yeah. And so, you know, it's a big shift. People go to restaurants and their favorite dish is no longer there. And so there's this all hands on deck, but we need to help growers, you know, do whatever they can. And, you know, and obviously things like the Internet of Things and sensors and data, that's certainly part of it. I wouldn't be so bold as to think it's all of it. It's just, you know, there's a lot of things we need to do. But yeah, and so being able to help out, and if I don't have unlimited water, or if I, you know, and also this is obviously an economics thing as well. You know, if I'm going to a grower anywhere, I can't lead the discussion with, I'm here to help you save the planet, because actually they're actually wanting to know, how are you going to save me money, or how am I going to make money, or how am I going to, you know, those kind of things. But luckily they actually go hand in hand if you do it right. And there's the growing part of it. There's on the farm, there's sensors, you know, again, Fred's probably a model that a lot of people could follow for how to do this. Because, you know, when I spend time on different kind of mega farms, you know, just giant operations, you know, they're not as mechanized as you might think. Everyone's facing labor shortages all over the place. And when you're not as fully automated and mechanized, you're having manual people having to do things like, I'm on a schedule and I've got to go turn a crank to turn on the irrigation system, right? Excuse me. And a lot of other things. Having people on ATVs driving through the farm looking for the beginnings of fire blight or other kind of pests, you know, to head that off at the pass, because, you know, that could be tens of millions in loss if blight gets into your fields and stuff like that. So there's a lot to do with sensors. There's a lot to do with connectivity to make that happen. And it all has to be done economically, though. I see no shortage of science projects out there where people are showing off all this great technology that is just completely unaffordable. That no grower could ever afford to buy this stuff. And so the key thing is beating up on the price, because, you know, a lot of growers tell me, they've bought some of these cool weather stations that they put out, but they're really expensive, and so maybe they can only afford to put one every 500 acres or something like that. But what I hear from them is, for them, at least now, the holy grail is if I could just get one device with multiple sensors per acre, that would just be a dream come true. Obviously, the cost has to come down to make that possible, and you got to have that connectivity. But to have that, being able to sprinkle sensors more densely throughout your growing operation, so that you have, when we say precision agriculture, it's hard to be precision if you don't have much coverage, right? And so we need to know exactly what's going on in each part of the farm so that we apply the right amount of water or the right amount of pesticides or the right amount of fertilizer, and not waste it. In the state of Washington, we have abundant water, and so it costs them almost nothing, but they can still water too much and it has an impact on their growing. In California, the water's gone almost. And so that's an interesting deal. The other thing I'm involved in, aside from sensorizing farms and getting that data, because it's all about the data and the insights you derive from that data and the actions you take. And in Fred's case, automation, which is where we need to go. But a lot of people don't realize that after harvest, you've probably seen all kinds of figures, but between 30 and as high as 40% of food is wasted after harvest, before it gets to your dinner table or a restaurant or into a grocery store. And so there is so many challenges just in the supply chain, because there's still long lines at these food banks. And yet when you hear that, I forgot the amount, there was actual tonnage measured on how much food is wasted. And what I heard was that could feed about half the planet with all the food that's wasted. And so that's just kind of crazy. So I feel like we have a lot of work to do on the farm, throughout the supply chain, tracing, tracking. Like when Fred talks about the nutrients in the soil and going up market, with higher quality coffee. I mean, what happened to us several years ago? The rise of things like Whole Foods and organics. And we realized, oh, people actually want to know what's in this stuff. People want to see it on the package. People will actually pay more money for this stuff. Before, it was kind of like Fred was saying, commodity coffee. It's like, yeah, it's just food. It's just whatever. But now they care. And so, if we can accurately trace from the beginnings, the soil, the location, all the nutrients, and trace it through that supply chain to the grocery store, there's definitely more money to be made there. And so anyway, there's lots of opportunity, but I think we all need to work together to make it happen.
Yeah, that's right. So Fred, because Rob, what you just brought up about kind of moving up the food chain and kind of being able to track where your food's coming from, a couple of our speakers coming up have a unique opportunity to do that. Fred, how did you decide to kind of move up and kind of create additional value and go away from a commodity product towards kind of a more quality product? And what were the challenges? How did you use technology? I want to stick on technology here. We'll talk about business models later, but how did you make that decision and what did you decide to do?
Well, the shift began before I started here at Kaua'i Coffee in 2015. The original business model that was developed under Alexander and Baldwin back in the 80s was, can we produce commodity coffee in Hawaii? It was built on the sugar model that we had been using for 100 years. Mm-hmm. The cost of labor, the cost of land, the cost of inputs just doesn't make that possible. My growing cost is easily 5, sometimes 10 times what the C price, the commodity price of coffee is worldwide. I will never get to that cost point. Physically impossible. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we have, and it's something that's relevant to every single farmer that's on this call or anybody else that's listening in, is we have the uniqueness of what we produce here in Hawaii, whether it's a type of crop, the beef that we produce, the kalo, you name it. It has to be value added. We cannot compete against commodity anything, anywhere in the world. So that shift began before I started. What I realized very quickly is we have a choice where we sit in objective terms in the coffee rankings, and also subjectively what the public believes about us. as a company and as a producer. And we decided to attack both of those simultaneously. What can we do physically to change the properties of our coffee? And that absolutely rests in the soil. It rests in our farming practices. It rests in how we move our coffee from literally from seed to cup and every step along the way. I break one of those pieces in that chain and I'm delivering coffee that's not worth its money. The other part of that is that the subjective. We're selling something that by all rights they can buy from somewhere else in the world that's almost as good, maybe better, at a fraction of the cost. How do I convince that buyer that my product is worth it? And really what we're selling is, in our case, not coffee. We're selling aloha. We're selling the memory of their visit to our island. We're selling them the romance of Hawaii, the perception of Hawaii that they take with them. So that really comes down to culture, comes down to the way we treat our team. So that's why we moved into some of the sustainability certifications. In our case, Fair Trade USA, Rainforest Alliance, and Non-GMO Project Verified. So people can look at it and go, oh, I see where they're going here. And so changing our quality or changing our position in the market is not as easy as just farming better. It's telling your story better. And that's another thing that I think is especially relevant, not just from a physical technology point of view, but also from a marketing. I'll call it marketing technology. How do we get that word out? How do we share our pictures, our videos, our stories, our shareables in such a way that people come away with, I know it's a little bit more, but I'm willing to pay for it. So again, objective and subjective, but we have to move on both fronts if we're going to change our quality position in the marketplace.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Rob, you've been doing a lot of work on the technology side around the world. Are you seeing similar applications of kind of technology and kind of that business model component that Fred talked about in what you're doing?
Absolutely. You know, it took me a long time as an engineer to realize that marketing is half the battle. But it is, and it is storytelling. No doubt about it. For instance, I'll see growers who are growing apples, let's say, and you know what they're doing now? Well, they've probably been doing it for a while. In the orchards, in between the rows of apples, they're laying out this kind of, sometimes it's a mylar, sometimes it's a really nice, whatever, it's white, but the takeaway is it's reflecting the sun back up to the bottoms of the apples to basically give them a unified tan, if you want to call it that way. But it's not for nothing. It's because, for right or wrong, people, when they're buying something, they look at it and they judge whether they're going to buy that apple by how it looks. And they've determined that it's worth that cost to do that extra to reflect sunlight to the bottoms of the apples because it increases their sales. And so they're keenly aware. And so while we're doing sustainable things and we're trying to reduce input costs, absolutely, just like Fred says, they are all in with whatever it takes to make the product they make more valuable. I go in those packing houses and I see the conveyor belts with the apples, and there's computerized vision scanners and people, and the bad ones are going off on the other conveyor belt and the good ones keep on making it to market. Now maybe bad ones get turned into applesauce or something like that, or other products. But that's a thing. There's so much, I'm amazed to see how many apples are on the ground when I'm walking through apple orchards that aren't even going to get a chance to be harvested the right way. And so, it's great also about, when you talk about business models, I've just generically speaking about Internet of Things, is realizing that it affords you new business models that you hadn't thought of before. Usually it's always been a real transactional thing. I make this product and I sell it. With the Internet of Things, this notion of you starting to do things as a service sometimes, and it may or may not apply to farming. I don't want to pound a square peg in a round hole, but I've certainly seen, those of you who know something like software as a service, that the rise of that happened, I'd say, early 2000s with Salesforce.com. And I'm just going to pay to use it, and I'm not buying this software, and it's just like a subscription. you're seeing other inanimate objects being able to be delivered as a service with a subscription, which is great. When you can go from a capital expenditure to an OpEx, if you don't have a lot of cash laying around, it's a great way to get into something. GE started that initially with aircraft engines. And when they realized that their technology and the sensors inside an aircraft engine were dense enough that they could take a bet, and take the risk and sell, by the mile, the aircraft engine, rather than you having to pay millions for it. When I was at Hitachi, we did the same thing with bullet trains. The Lumada IoT technology I helped build, in analytics, we were able to take the risk and do trains as a service. We had 40,000 sensors on each bullet train feeding data into our analytics, and we're crunching that stuff in real time. And that allowed us to take that bet that, I think we feel comfortable delivering this as a subscription. And it helped us win business in the UK that Hitachi never would have won in a million years. They had no footprint in Europe. These are just kind of examples, but you can start letting the motors run in your brain to think about, do I have something that I could sell as a service? And it could be something like coffee. I mean, all kinds of people are getting people hooked on a monthly subscription and having something show up on their front door, like Fred.
Yeah. Like Fred.
Yeah.
I would like coffee every month from Fred. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so gosh, the marketing videos, use those drones to fly over that. Because everybody has those memories. My memories of Hawaii are a little different. It was from me driving my submarine and cruising around Ford Island, and the skipper saying, "All right, Petty Officer Tiffany, make sure you don't crash into the Arizona. That could be career limiting." And so that's my memories.
Right.
But people would probably have definitely those fond memories, and they want to bring it back. And I think the storytelling makes all the difference.
Yeah, sharing aloha is really the significant. I took my background off because we now have the capability to literally invite people to our farm or to a scene in our farm at a moment's notice. It's just,
Oh, cool.
There you go. And
I love it.
You can add whatever you want to it. And again, our story is not farming. Our story, and I don't know if I speak for the other farmers on the call. Our story is our community. That's what people are truly buying, as they become part of our sales network. We view our visitor center at the farm not as yes, we do transactions. Yes, we receive revenue. But it's not a transaction, it's actually the beginning of a relationship. You are now one of us. You just had a chance to walk around my backyard. Mm-hmm. You're part of our family. And the more that we can share the spirit of the place authentically, because if you're doing it inauthentically, it isn't going to flow. It's transparent. So that's where the aloha of our team, the word of mouth about our place. In Hawaii, we talk about a sense of place, and that's truly what we have to embody. That's why the sustainability and obviously the ecological benefits, environmental benefits, as well as what are we giving back to our community, are so significant. We're kind of veering off technology, but at the same time, we need to be using technology to help tell that story.
No, that's a really good point. And we actually have a whole group that's going to talk about marketing and business models in a little bit.
Okay.
And Fred, you brought up some of the other folks on this conference, at the conference that are listening in. If, for the other farmers or ranchers that are kind of in a similar boat, what is the one piece of technology, and then Rob, I'd like you to answer the same question. What is the one thing that you think kind of has added a lot of value to what you are doing? Your operation, yeah.
I'll do my best to capture it. We have many fantastic farmers on Kauai, people who know how to grow things. Unfortunately, because of the environment we live in, unless you're a subsistence farmer, and that's a business model, you have to be an entrepreneur. You have to know you have to know your cost of production. You have to know
Right.
your sales price and your marketing. And that's something that, especially in our fast-paced 21st century world, everything is moving so fast. Understanding those basics and building toward the market in such a way that you remain economically sustainable is absolutely key. Everything else that we're talking about are just tools to do that. So, we keep coming back to the, what do I know and how do I know it and how do I put it into use? Rob, you brought it up really well. If it isn't adding to the bottom line or to the value in the community, you're missing the boat. You're wasting your effort. So that's one of the biggest keys that I think is there, is either education or knowledge or sharing how we become more economically sustainable within our fragile environment here in Kauai.
Mhm.
I like your comment about knowing. I often tell people before IoT, you're guessing, or you're doing things based on past practices, probably good guesses. You might be right on the money. With IoT, with those sensors and that telemetry and that data, you're not guessing. Your farm is talking to you and it's telling you exactly what it needs, when it needs it, where it needs it. I talked to some growers, I don't want to make a blanket statement here, but a lot of them say, you know what? Out on a lot of farms, we're seeing guys who are 60 and older, and we're seeing young guys who are in their 20s and 30s. And we have this huge gap of, I'm not seeing the 40s and 50s guys, because they all left the farms and went to the cities and never came back. And so a lot of these younger folks who are finding themselves, like, all right, you got this. They're like, well, I'm going to have to trust in data and concrete analytics, because I can't tell that story about my grandpa, my grandmother, my great grandmother who've been on the farm for generations. And so they are having to rely on the data, how their farm is talking to them. And it's also critical, there's all these platforms and technologies out there, and a lot of times it's like a Swiss Army knife. This is going to help you do anything for anything. Having agriculture specific analytics that are specific to your soil type, to the crops you're growing, the orchards you have, the nutrients you expect to have, the rainfall, all that is super critical to make sure it's very specific, because you want to get the right kind of insights. And then, as Fred's doing, tying that to automation. And maybe that first baby step of automation is, it's a notification to tell someone to go do something. And then the next step is, oh, I'm fully integrated into the irrigation system, and it's telling the irrigation system to turn on or to turn off, or things like that. And that, obviously that's the tip of the iceberg. But yeah, all that's super critical. And I think it can make a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the expression that I use quite often, and my team uses it on me all the time, sensors aren't magic.
Right.
Sensors are just sources of data to help us make better decisions faster. That's all it is.
That's it. Because what are they replacing? They're replacing you walking around yourself, visually inspecting these things, writing down what you see, and you taking an action on it. And whether that's out on a farm or if it's in a giant factory making cars, IoT and sensors, that's really all it's doing. It's replacing a person with a clipboard in many cases, right? But it saves you time, because it's going to do it for you while you're sleeping, all the time, in real time. And then the more those agriculture specific analytics they're running the whole time, and automation, it lets you do more with less. And kind of, as I said at the beginning, we got a whole planet full of farmers who are going to need to do more than they ever imagined with a whole lot less. So but it's exciting. You know what? It's a challenge of not just a lifetime, it's a challenge of multiple lifetimes. And I actually think it's kind of cool to be involved in something that's way bigger than yourself.
Well, with that missing generation and the lost element of time, sensors really allow us to learn faster, to gather that knowledge from our kupuna, knowledge from our fathers and mothers in the field. The observational tools that have taken thousands of years to accumulate now have to be learned, taught, and then executed in a very short amount of time. It's that, the old military OODA loop. We're now having to do that on a farming basis. How do I get that information faster, make my decision faster, and actually do the right thing so I can get on to the next phase?
Absolutely.
My father used to always tell me he was an apple farmer, so I'm familiar with how things run in Wenatchee and other parts of north central Washington. But he said, and then he became a coffee farmer. He said, farming is easy. It's just doing the right thing at the right time. Enter sensors.
Right. So when Fred first told me that, I was like, I love that statement. It's just knowing what to do. You know, how do you know it's the right time, and how do you know what to do? And kind of this technology, that's the kind of emerging technology that we're all using, is starting to kind of enable that. So you do know when it's the right time.
Yeah.
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 So let me ask you a question. We have about 5 or so minutes. I don't see any questions coming in yet, but I just ask the people listening in, if you have a question, please type it in the chat box. But one question I've had is, one of the reasons that Vinny and I started this conference was to say, well, how do we kind of impart knowledge around the island, and then also off island, on island, and on, just kind of back and forth. So there's a knowledge component to this, but also a sustainability component. And sustainability has so many different kind of uses and definitions, but I was thinking of it in terms of economic sustainability for the island. We imagined this pre-COVID, but COVID has really accentuated the need for the island to say, well, we're not going to make all of our money on tourism. And quite frankly, there are so many resources on island. What is the future sustainability economic model for the island look like? And with the vast resources in agriculture on the island, and Fred, some of the stuff you're doing, I wonder, is there an opportunity for us to keep some of the talent on island to do more technical things? Rob, to go build the next IoT sensor company. I mean, realize we're a little far away from Silicon Valley, which I think is probably a good thing.
It is a good thing.
Yeah, but how might we imagine a world where Kaua'i also cultivates the next generation of software developers to address some of these on-island farming problems, and then export that around the world? Any thoughts on that, you guys?
So this Thunderstruck technology I built that's doing this IoT and analytics for agriculture, one of the things we're also doing is real concretely here is working with the Girl Scouts of America, actually, and they have a STEM program. And so we're showing them how they can work with all these kind of sensors and devices and how they can program those. They work with our platform and they see how real things work. Obviously we see lots of efforts around STEM and education to educate young people on these kind of new technologies that are always kind of generically say, oh, these are the jobs of the future, we want to help you. But making it really concrete, it's like, not only is this educating you in this advanced technology, this is something that's a good vocation, and this actually makes a difference for Kaua'i and for farming. It's not just in a vacuum. And so when you do automation, and Fred said it right at the beginning, I know a lot of people feel like technology sometimes is the boogeyman and it's eliminating jobs or replacing humans. But in this situation, we just don't have enough people. And so we have no choice. And so we're not, but as Fred said, we're pushing, going further up the stack so that the people who are going to work in Kaua'i will be able to do these higher skilled jobs that are very satisfying, and make a huge difference around the technology. They're not going to be out there picking things all the time or pulling weeds or fertilizing or things like that. They're going to be working on advanced stuff that I think they'll get, satisfaction out of. And so, yeah, as always, I think it's education. And I think we have to double down on that and then and make it real for young people and say, there is a path for you to be here on Kaua'i and be able to lift everybody up.
Great. Fred, what are your thoughts on that?
I actually just saw the question that Lori put up.
Yeah, I know. I just saw some questions come in too. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for that question, Lori. That's and it's related to the question that was just asked. What can we be doing here on Kaua'i that has applicability elsewhere? And Lori's question, you mind if I read it?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Try to see where it is. Could you talk about the impact of farming using pesticides and depleting the ground for nutrients by monocropping? Monocropping is a 4-letter word, even though it's many more letters than that. And the reason that monocropping came about, and this is based on just my perspective, is that's what was efficient at the time, given what they knew at the time. And much of what we're doing here on Kauai, and much of our historic farming practices, kalalois, et cetera, are truly farming systems. And if our system is only optimized for cost input and labor reduction, we end up with monocropping because that's what pays the best. And as we move toward sustainability from where I sit, it's now cover cropping rather than pesticide use. It becomes mechanized weed control, perhaps, rather than chemical weed control. And so I'm doing two things at that point, and this is just my farm, but there are many other farms that do this. I'm now taking my food waste and my green waste, and I'm composting it to go back in as a fertilizer supplement. I'm looking at increasing the soil organic matter in my soils, because that's where the biology lives, is inside the soil organic matter. What else can we be doing in our farms based on what we now know and can potentially predict or observe with sensors that allows me to do the right thing at the right time, grow another crop between my rows, perhaps. How do I do that? What machine do I do? How do I optimize my irrigation so that I'm watering two crops, or I'm rotating crops in such a way? And I think that's where things are going. You add to that the use of animals, potentially grazing between rows of trees. What's that, silviculture? Is that what they call it? So those are all some of the things that I think are now going to become the way things are done, and we'll see less true monocropping as a result.
Great. Another question that just popped up, around IoT and the sensors and the cost of sensors. Rob, any thoughts real quick on, you see the prices coming down? I mean, obviously it's really cool to have a highly connected farm, but not everybody can afford that, especially in kind of smaller farms or in, third world developing countries.
No, absolutely. Everything I'm working towards is to get to that place, actually. You start at some place. You know what? Here's a great example. Just think of Tesla and Elon Musk. He had to build the most expensive ones first and sell it to people with a lot of money. Then he could come out with the S, and then he came out with the 3. And it's the same way of how we're going to do that as we slowly beat down the cost of these sensors and devices. And so, like I probably mentioned at the beginning, I go to all these cool demonstration things with drones and all this stuff, and it's horribly expensive and no one can afford it. But over time, and with a little creativity and working with different folks to build these microcontrollers and sensors, we are actually absolutely working on beating that down. Are we there yet? Absolutely not. But the goal is, because like I said earlier, I want to be able to, they need to be cheap enough that I'm sprinkling these things all over the place so that I have the most granular view of my operation. And so you can't always do it today. A lot of the stuff I'm working on, obviously, we spent a lot of time beating up on the cost of connectivity. And so we're doing a better job there. That used to be really expensive, but no doubt about it, it's devices. And so where those devices are sourced from, obviously play a role in cost. Of course, and not to rain on my own parade right now, but we're seeing, the whole deal about supply chain being a thing right now. Supply chain is actually having an impact on sensors and devices right now. You hear about things like the chip shortage and stuff like that. And so I've already seen an impact on that negatively right now from typically, sources that we've always been able to reliably get stuff from. And so I know I'm not answering Yoshi's question fully, but it's certainly the goal. It's the destination, and we're scrambling.
Part of it rests in sensors that are now integrated into data platforms that most people already have in their pocket.
Yeah,
and that's one of the
That's
things.
a good point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, good. I know we're just kind of right up at the edge of our time here. So I know we've got some other questions in there, but we'll hopefully be able to address those in a future point. Fred, Rob, I really appreciate you guys taking some time. I hope that next year we can all actually be on Fred's farm having this discussion in a little more length. So thank you both for your time and for all that you're doing for the island.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, my brain's spinning.
Thank you,
So,
Rob. Thank you, Mike. Awesome panel. Just a couple comments. You're going to hear Fred was like, okay, well, what's the right time and how do you know? So in our next discussion, we're going to hear a little bit about the history of how the Polynesian culture, the islanders that were here first, knew the right time. So that's so interesting to hang on to. And Rob, as you're developing these awesome sensors, would you consider Kaua'i as a testing ground? Could we start doing some of those things with our farmers here?
Absolutely. I mean, I think of a perfect world where Kaua'i becomes a model for the rest of the world to follow, actually.
Yep.
I think that'd be great. Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So everyone, what great energy flying around this conversation. Totally am on fire when you said in 2050, 10 billion people. Yeah, I had my number was 2025. From 1975 to 2025, we'll double our population from 4 million to 8 billion. So we got to get to work, and the farmers on this call know it. Everyone knows it. So let's just take a short break and then we'll come back. All right, everyone. So 2-minute break. Okay, we'll see you soon.